Greetings on behalf of the United Nations in South Africa, and thank you to the Speaker of the National Assembly and the Speakers Forum of South Africa for the kind invitation to participate and also share a message of support during the South African Legislative Sector Oversight Summit. I regret not joining you today in person, but I thoroughly enjoyed being part of the discussions yesterday and hearing from the Deputy President, the Speaker herself, the Chief Justice, and the EU Ambassador. Distinguished participants, ensuring no one is left behind and realizing the well-being of people and planet through effective, credible, transparent, responsive, and robust institutions and advancing good governance is at the heart of our collective people-centered and planet-sensitive efforts. The oversight for impact focus of the South African legislative sector, along with our deliberations today, yesterday, as well as going forward, and the interventions that we will be advancing and which are expected to flow from this summit, are inextricably linked to the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, especially SDG 16, which focuses on promoting peaceful and inclusive societies for sustainable development, providing access to justice for all, and building effective, accountable, and inclusive institutions at all levels. National and subnational institutions like the National Assembly, the provincial and traditional leaders' legislatures, as well as the councils, are therefore key for oversight to truly respond to the needs of people and to foster peaceful and inclusive societies. That's why the United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres has said, the cornerstone of the rule of law is that all people, institutions, and entities, public and private, including the state itself, are accountable before the law. From the smallest village to the global stage, the rule of law is all that stands between peace and stability, and a brutal struggle for power and resources. Advancing rights, delivering services, and ensuring equitable access to and use of resources can be achieved through a collaborative and inclusive whole-of-society approach, not just limited to the legislative arm, but inclusive of civil society formations and all communities and stakeholders, particularly women and young people. Young people are key because Africa has the youngest population worldwide. 70% of the population of sub-Saharan Africa are under the age of 30. According to data from Statistics South Africa itself, in May last year, approximately 3.7 million youth out of 10.2 million, that is 36.1% of young people aged 15 to 24 years, were not in employment, education, or training. This is precisely why the UN, in its cooperation framework with the government and people of South Africa, is calling for a capable state. Also ensuring that investments in education, social protection, universal health coverage, skills building, particularly for young people, entrepreneurship opportunities for women and girls, tackling of criminality and violence, as well as having meaningful participation in decision-making processes at every level is crucial. We firmly ascribe to the affirmation that legislators are indeed powerful symbols of the vibrancy, inclusivity, and accountability that characterize South Africa's ongoing democratic evolution 30 years in. The UN will continue to engage with and accompany this key sector in a collective effort to give everyone a better life. Distinguished participants and friends, South Africa offers a lot of examples of good practices to other countries, especially in improving incomes and welfare of its citizens. Its constitution is one of the most robust, rights-oriented, and equitable legal frameworks globally. Its legislature and executive is truly gender balanced. It is the most sophisticated economy in the continent. It has the largest coverage of social protection in Africa and one of the largest treatment programs for HIV/AIDS in the world. It has one of the most progressive tax schedules in the developing world. And the country has succeeded in protecting its institutions, especially its judiciary and other Chapter 9 institutions. But despite this encouraging and stellar record, the country is grappling with high unemployment, poverty and inequality, devastating health and natural disasters, inefficient transport, energy, safety and public services. These challenges are hurdles on the pathway towards sustainable development that delivers the national development aspirations of the country. The United Nations in South Africa, through our cooperation framework with the government and people, is supporting and collaborating with the government and stakeholders to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals. One of the strategic priorities of the cooperation framework is relevant to the theme of this deliberation. It's focusing on effective, efficient, and transformative governance. Our aim is that by 2025, women and marginalized groups participate meaningfully in decision-making processes and access to justice. I'm happy to note good progress is being made in this regard. The other aim is that by 2025, state institutions deliver effective public services to all, and oversight bodies are strengthened. Work in this regard is ongoing and needs to be stepped up. Some of the recent collaborative efforts the UN in South Africa has supported and accompanied include, for example, an advisory paper on the possible role of the legislature in planning, budgeting, and policymaking, and oversight of inclusive economic recovery planning. Another is the high-level panel on the assessment of key legislation and the acceleration of fundamental change, which was chaired by former President Halema Motlanthe. Another is the technical cooperation agreement with Parliament in order to empower MPs on children's rights, child budgeting, and on violence against children advanced through UNICEF. Another aspect is informed laws and protected budgetary allocations for children, women, health, education, GBV, environment, combating crime and drugs, and also social protection. We've also engaged with the KZN legislators' multi-party women's caucus on monitoring SDG implementation and gender mainstreaming in policymaking and monitoring. Towards the end of last year, we also worked on customary male initiation behavior change initiatives led by the National House of Traditional and Khoisan Leaders, as well as the provincial legislative and executive of the Eastern Cape. Distinguished delegates, permit me to reaffirm that the technical support of the United Nations to the legislative sector in localizing and monitoring the delivery of the Sustainable Development Goals and the national development priorities are topmost on our agenda. We also stand ready to support the legislative sector in assessing and monitoring South Africa's adherence and implementation of global multinational treaties, conventions, and commitments. Furthermore, we look forward to collaborating with all stakeholders in building the state capacity on service delivery, ensuring effective accountability by the executive, and meaningful oversight of the legislative, by the legislative sector, In closing, I would like to highlight this affirmation of the United Nations Deputy Secretary General, Ms. Amina Mohammed, on the role of parliaments in ensuring progress towards the achievement of the 2030 Agenda and the Sustainable Development Goals. The 2030 Agenda acknowledges the essential role of national parliaments through their enactment of legislation and adoption of budgets, and their role in ensuring accountability for the effective implementation of our commitments. Strong, effective partnerships between the parliamentarians and the executive branch and with provincial and local levels of government are vital to enable inclusive discussions and advance actions around the accomplishment of the Sustainable Development Goals. As parliamentarians, you speak for your constituents and ensure they speak for themselves and enjoy the benefits of our collective efforts. As legislators, you oversee budgets, policies, and laws with a vision informed by how communities can and must truly benefit. Let us therefore work together to truly ensure that no one is left behind and that all have a better life in South Africa, across the African continent, and beyond. I thank you.